The mop clattered against the marble floor as Jessica Bennett bent to retrieve it, her worn sneakers squeaking against the gleaming surface. Around her, the executive assistants of Morrison Enterprises swept past in their designer heels, their laughter floating through the air like champagne bubbles, effervescent, expensive, and entirely out of her reach. One woman wrinkled her nose as she passed, pulling her Chanel bag closer as if poverty were contagious. Jessica's hands, red and cracked from industrial cleaner, tightened around the mop handle. She'd scrubbed these floors for 3 weeks now, and in that time she'd become invisible. Or worse, she'd become something to look down upon, to step over, to ignore. What none of them knew, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that the wedding band hidden beneath her latex glove cost more than most of their annual salaries. And the man who'd placed it there? He was sitting in the penthouse office 40 floors above, completely unaware that his wife was being treated like dirt by his own employees. 3 months earlier, Jessica had been planning charity galas and sipping espresso at garden parties. She'd been Mrs. Alexander Morrison, wife of one of the most influential CEOs on the East Coast, living in a world of silk and security. But somewhere between the champagne toasts and the empty conversations, she'd lost herself. She'd become a decoration, a pretty fixture in her husband's impressive life. The disconnect had gnawed at her until she couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't remember who she'd been before the money and the mansion. "I need to do something real," she'd told Alexander one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to remember what matters." He'd looked at her with those dark eyes that had first captured her heart in a college library 7 years ago, back when he'd been a scholarship student with holes in his shoes and dreams bigger than the sky. "Then do it," he'd said simply. "Whatever you need." So she had. She'd applied for a cleaning position at his own company under her maiden name, Bennett. She'd wanted to see the world her husband had built from the ground up, to understand the people who kept his empire running, to do honest work with her own hands. Alexander had been concerned but supportive, agreeing to keep her identity secret. It was temporary, she'd promised. Just a few months to find herself again. She hadn't expected the cruelty. "Excuse me, you missed a spot." The voice was sharp, cutting. Jessica looked up to find Vanessa Chen, the senior marketing director, pointing a manicured finger at an imperceptible mark on the floor. "Right there. Do you see it, or do I need to get you glasses?" "I see it," Jessica replied quietly, moving her mop toward the spot. Her mother had been a housekeeper. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now doing the same work, in the same building where portraits of her at charity events hung in the conference rooms. "You know, it's really not that hard to do your job properly," Vanessa continued, her voice loud enough to attract attention from the other employees, gathering near the elevators. "I mean, if you can't even clean a floor, what can you do?" Jessica felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her head down. She'd learned that responding only made things worse. The other day, when she'd tried to hold the elevator for a group of rushing executives, one had actually said, "Take the service elevator, please. This one's for employees," as if she didn't work there too, as if her labor was less valuable than their PowerPoint presentations. But there were others. Marco, the security guard who always smiled and asked about her day. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly receptionist who'd shared her lunch when Jessica's had been stolen from the break room fridge. And David Chen, oddly enough, Vanessa's own husband and the company's CFO, who'd stopped to help her when she'd accidentally knocked over a trash bin, treating her with the same courtesy he'd show anyone else. It was David who'd struck up a conversation one morning while waiting for the elevator. "You're new to the city, right?" he'd asked kindly, having overheard her talking to Marco about finding affordable housing. "Yes, sir," Jessica had replied, maintaining her cover story. "Trying to make ends meet. My wife and I, we came from nothing," he'd said thoughtfully, though Jessica nearly choked on the irony. Vanessa treated her own husband's humble origins like a shameful secret. "Never forget where you come from. That's what keeps you human." The words had stayed with her, especially during the harder days. Like today when she'd overheard a group of junior executives laughing about the poor cleaning girl who probably couldn't even afford to eat at the food court in the building. She'd stood in the supply closet, tears streaming down her face, wondering if this experiment had been a terrible mistake. Everything changed on a Tuesday. Jessica was cleaning the executive floor, a task she usually dreaded. When she heard shouting from one of the offices, she recognized the voice. Gregory Santos, the VP of Operations. A man whose condescending comments she'd endured for weeks. But the other voice was small, frightened, and unmistakably young. She pushed the door open slightly and froze. A young intern, barely 20, was backed against the wall while Gregory leaned over her, his hand on the wall beside her head. "You want to get ahead in this company?" he was saying. "You need to be friendlier. Much friendlier. Please, Mr. Santos, I just want to do my job." The girl's voice shook. Jessica didn't think. She pushed through the door, her heart hammering. "Excuse me, sir. There's an emergency board meeting. Mr. Morrison needs to see you immediately." Gregory spun around, his face flushed with anger and guilt. "What? I didn't receive any notification." "It just came through," Jessica lied, meeting his eyes steadily. "He's asking for all VPs, now." The intern took the opportunity to slip past him and flee. Gregory's eyes narrowed at Jessica. "You're lying. You're just the cleaning lady. What would you know about board meetings?" "You're right," Jessica said softly. "I'm just the cleaning lady, but I know what I saw. And I'm guessing Mr. Morrison would want to know about it, too." For a moment, they stared at each other. Then Gregory's lip curled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I could have you fired before lunch. Who's going to believe you over me? You're nobody." "Maybe," Jessica acknowledged. "But I'm somebody enough to tell the truth." She turned and walked away on shaking legs, pulling out the personal cell phone she kept hidden in her pocket. She texted Alexander, "We need to talk. Tonight, it's important." But the confrontation had consequences. By the afternoon, whispers had spread through the building. The cleaning girl had harassed a VP. She'd made false accusations. She was trying to cause trouble, probably hoping for a payout. Vanessa had been particularly vocal, telling anyone who'd listen that people like that would say anything for attention and money. When Jessica arrived the next morning, she found her time card missing. The supervisor, a nervous man named Bill, couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Bennett. We're letting you go, effective immediately." "On what grounds?" Jessica asked, though she already knew. "Insubordination, making false accusations against senior staff. It's all documented." He handed her a folder, and Jessica saw that someone had been thorough. Statements from witnesses who hadn't even been there. A disciplinary record she'd never been shown. Complaints she'd never heard. Gregory had been busy. "This isn't right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," Bill repeated, and he actually seemed to mean it. "I'm just following orders from upstairs. You'll receive your final paycheck in the mail." Jessica walked through the lobby for the last time, past the people who'd sneered at her and the few who'd shown her kindness. Mrs. Patterson looked stricken, and Marco started to say something, but she shook her head. She needed to leave with whatever dignity she had left. She waited until evening, until Alexander came home to their penthouse apartment, his face already creased with concern from her text. She told him everything, the harassment she'd witnessed, the retaliation, the firing. His jaw tightened with each word, his hands clenching and unclenching. "I'll fix this," he said immediately. "Tomorrow I'll—" "No," Jessica took his hands. "Not like that. If you just fire Gregory and rehire me, what changes? The culture that allowed this, that allows people to be treated as less than because of their position, that stays the same. Then what do you want me to do?" She thought about Vanessa's cruelty and David's kindness, about Mrs. Patterson, sharing her lunch and the executives, who'd laughed at her poverty, about the young intern's terrified face and the system that had protected her abuser. "I want to tell the truth, all of it, but not as your wife, as the woman who lived it." The all-staff meeting the following week was mandatory. Employees packed into the main auditorium, speculation running rampant about the urgent gathering. Alexander stood at the podium, his expression unreadable, as Jessica waited in the wings, her heart threatening to break through her ribs. 3 months ago, Alexander began, his voice carrying through the space. "Someone joined this company as a cleaning staff member. She worked the early shifts, cleaned your offices, emptied your trash. Some of you didn't notice her at all. Some of you treated her with kindness and respect. And some of you—" He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Some of you showed exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching." A murmur rippled through the audience. Alexander continued. That woman is about to tell you her story. And I'm asking you to listen, really listen, because the way we respond to what she says will define what kind of company this is and what kind of people we want to be. Jessica walked onto the stage, and the murmur became a roar. She saw the moment of recognition ripple through the crowd, saw Vanessa's face drain of color, saw Gregory start to stand and then freeze, saw David Chen's eyes widen with understanding and regret. She told them everything: the loneliness of invisibility, the sting of casual cruelty, the fear of coming forward about harassment, the retaliation when she'd tried to do the right thing. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. The guilty parties knew exactly who they were. "I didn't do this to punish anyone," Jessica said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "I did it to understand. And what I learned is that we're all human. All of us. The person who cleans your office has dreams and struggles just like you do. They deserve the same respect, the same dignity, the same protection. And when we forget that, when we create hierarchies of worth based on job titles or salaries, we lose something essential. We lose our humanity." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. "My husband and I are implementing changes," Jessica continued. "A comprehensive anti-harassment policy with independent reporting structures. Mandatory respect and inclusion training for all staff, including executives. An anonymous feedback system so that every employee, regardless of position, has a voice. And most importantly, a cultural shift that starts at the top. Because a title doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you more responsible to everyone else." As Jessica left the stage, she passed Vanessa, who couldn't meet her eyes. But she also passed David Chen, who stopped her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for reminding us, for being brave enough to show us." In the weeks that followed, Gregory Santos was terminated after an investigation, confirmed multiple harassment complaints that had been buried. Several other executives resigned or were let go. But there were positive changes. 2. Employees at all levels began eating lunch together. Barriers broke down, conversations opened up. Mrs. Patterson told Jessica that she felt seen for the first time in decades. Marco said his daughter wanted to be brave like Mrs. Morrison when she grew up. Vanessa Chen requested a meeting. She sat across from Jessica, her perfectly composed exterior cracking. "I was you once," she confessed. "I cleaned houses to pay for college. I was so ashamed of it that when I finally made something of myself, I think I became what I'd hated. Someone who looked down instead of remembering to look up." "It's not too late," Jessica said gently. "To remember. To change." That night, Jessica stood at the window of her home, looking out over the city lights. Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. She thought about the question. She'd set out to do something real, to remember what mattered. And she'd found it, in the small kindnesses of strangers, in the courage to speak truth to power, in the understanding that humanity isn't measured by bank accounts or business cards. "I found more," she said finally. "I found out that the most important thing we can do is see each other. Really see each other, not as titles or positions or stereotypes, but as people. Imperfect, struggling, hoping people just trying to make it through the day." "And now?" Alexander asked. Jessica smiled, thinking of the foundations they were planning, the programs they'd implement, the lives they might touch. But mostly she thought of the young intern who'd found the courage to file a formal complaint, of Mrs. Patterson's gratitude, of Marco's daughter's dreams. "Now," she said, "we keep remembering. We keep trying. We keep being human. Because in the end, that was all any of them could do. Look up when the world said to look down. Extend a hand when it would be easier to turn away, and remember that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be seen."